Welcome to r/Pettyrevenge, where people share stories about getting a little justice in unexpected ways. Sometimes life hands you justice on a silver platter, and when it does, it feels surprisingly sweet. You might think that the past is behind you and that old wounds will heal. But then the universe steps in to remind you that karma has a way of catching up, especially with bullies. Today's story is about a time I never thought I'd get to evict the very same person who made my teenage years miserable. It's a tale of how life gave me an unexpected chance for payback, and how I took it without hesitation. If you've ever been tormented by someone in your past, you'll understand why this felt like the perfect kind of revenge. Let's dive into how a shy, quiet kid from high school got to turn the tables on her bully many years later. Back in high school, I was the quiet, shy kid who mostly kept to herself. I never spoke up much, and I wasn't part of the popular crowd. I just wanted to get through the day without being noticed. Unfortunately, that made me an easy target for Derek, the loud, popular, arrogant kid who ruled our school's hallways like a king. Derek had a knack for making people's lives miserable, especially those who didn't fit into his idea of cool. I remember the first time he humiliated me. It was in the cafeteria. I was just trying to eat lunch when he grabbed my tray, spilled my food everywhere, and laughed with his friends while I scrambled to clean up the mess. That was just the beginning. There were so many other moments. Getting shoved in the hallway, tripped in front of teachers, and whispered insults whenever I passed by. He seemed to enjoy making me feel small. One day, during gym class, he made sure everyone heard when he called me a loser in front of the entire class. The worst part was the teachers never stepped in. They looked the other way like it was just kids being kids. Those years left a mark on me. The constant bullying chipped away at my confidence and made me dread school every single day. I felt trapped, like no one could hear me or see what I was going through. High school wasn't just hard, it was a daily battle to survive emotionally. After graduation, I was determined to leave those painful memories behind. I moved away from my small town to start fresh. I went to college, earned my degree, and built a career in property management. The change of scenery helped me heal, and with time, the sting of high school faded. I learned to trust again and found new friends who valued me for who I was. I worked hard to grow both personally and professionally. Although the scars from those years didn't disappear completely, I refused to let Derek's bullying define me. Life was moving forward, and I was proud of how far I'd come. I never expected to cross paths with my old bully again, let alone have the chance to hold some power over him. But sometimes, life's ironies surprise you in the best ways. Little did I know, my job would bring Derek right back into my world. And this time, I was the one calling the shots. After finishing school and moving on from my past, I landed a job managing rental properties for a local company. It was a fresh start in a completely new field, and I was excited to learn everything about it. My days quickly filled with reading leases, handling applications, and learning the legal ins and outs of tenant rights and landlord responsibilities. I discovered that managing properties meant balancing firm authority with fairness. I liked the independence the job gave me, the ability to make decisions, solve problems, and maintain order. It wasn't just about collecting rent, it was about creating a safe, respectful environment for everyone involved. Evictions were rare but inevitable sometimes, and I had to understand the correct legal procedures to carry them out without unnecessary conflict. It was empowering to know that if someone wasn't following the rules, I had the power to take action. Little did I know this job would soon place me in a position I never expected, facing someone from my painful past. But for now, I was focused on doing my job well, enjoying my independence, and building a reputation for being both firm and fair. One busy afternoon, an application for a new tenant landed on my desk. The name caught my eye. It sounded vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. I skimmed through the details. Steady income, good references, clean rental history. Nothing alarming. The applicant seemed perfectly suitable. I filed the application away for approval, thinking little more about the name. With the usual checks completed and no red flags, the application was approved and the tenant moved in without issue. I assumed it was just another routine case. A new person starting a new chapter in one of our properties. Days went by and I still couldn't shake the feeling that the name had some connection to my past, but I brushed it off. After all, coincidences happen. Maybe it was just a common name or my mind playing tricks. For now, I was focused on other duties, and this new tenant was just another name on my growing list. It didn't take long for problems to start cropping up. The first red flag was rent. It arrived late, sometimes days past the due date. I sent polite reminders, but the excuses kept coming. Then, neighbors began complaining about loud music and late-night parties. When I reached out to the tenant, their response was rude and dismissive, showing an attitude that was both entitled and disrespectful. Communication became a constant struggle. Phone calls went unanswered or met with hostility. Emails were curt and sometimes ignored altogether. The more I tried to enforce the rules, the more difficult the tenant became. Something wasn't right. The attitude reminded me of someone I knew from way back, but I couldn't be sure. So I started digging into the tenant's background, checking social media, property records, and anything else publicly available. As I pieced the information together, the memories hit me like a punch. This was Derek, the bully from high school. It was surreal. The same arrogant, rude kid who had made my teenage years miserable was now living in a property I managed. And here I was, holding all the cards. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief. Life really does work in mysterious ways. It took me a little while, but eventually, I connected the dots. The tenant's name, the attitude, the way he carried himself, it all pointed to one person. Derek, my high school bully. The arrogant kid who'd tormented me for years was now living under my management. I couldn't believe the universe had handed me this moment. When I finally confronted him, it was clear he didn't recognize me. Derek looked puzzled, trying to place my face. Maybe time and distance had blurred his memory, or maybe he had just never cared enough to remember the quiet kid he bullied. Either way, the recognition was one-sided. Despite the flood of emotions, I chose to keep my identity to myself for the time being. There was no rush and no reason to stir the pot prematurely. I wanted to see how this would play out, and I was determined to handle it with calm professionalism. I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of knowing he'd affected me after all these years. Instead, I kept my cards close, watching him carefully. I was ready for whatever came next, knowing that patience would be my greatest weapon. For now, Derek was just another tenant, but deep down I knew this story was far from over. As the weeks went by, Derek's behavior grew worse. At first, it was just the usual complaints, late rent, noise, and disrespect. But soon, it escalated. Derek started threatening legal action, claiming I was harassing him. He refused to pay rent on time and ignored all warnings. Other tenants were fed up with the constant disturbances and came to me with their concerns. Complaints about loud music, trash in the hallways, and even vandalism started piling up. I knew I had to act quickly to maintain order and keep everyone safe. I documented everything meticulously. Late payments, complaints, Derek's rude emails and phone calls. I made sure every step was recorded, knowing that if this went to court, I needed to be prepared. The power was in my hands, but I couldn't let emotions dictate my actions. Derek's aggressive attitude only made me more determined to follow the rules to the letter. No shortcuts, no favors. I would play by the book and let his own behavior lead to his downfall. The more he pushed, the clearer it became that eviction was inevitable. This wasn't just about rent anymore. It was about standing up for the community and for myself. Derek was digging his own grave, and I was ready to watch him fall. With all the evidence in hand, I decided to start the eviction process. But with a twist. I wouldn't rush or cut corners. Instead, I meticulously followed every legal step, ensuring there was no way Derek could claim unfair treatment. Every notice was precise and professional. Every deadline was met exactly as required. I responded promptly to his threats and complaints, but never gave in to his demands or tantrums. I stayed calm and composed, letting the system do its work. Derek's frustration was palpable. He tried to argue, to intimidate, even to charm, but none of it worked. He was trapped in the rules he so often tried to bend. Meanwhile, the other tenants started to see that something was finally being done, and morale in the building improved. Watching Derek flounder was oddly satisfying. After years of his bullying, it felt like justice was being served in the most fitting way, not through revenge or violence, but through patience and persistence. This was my petty revenge, and it was sweet. No dramatic confrontations or shouting matches, just the slow, inevitable collapse of Derek's entitled facade. I was in control now, and I intended to keep it that way until the very end. Once the decision was made, I served Derek the official eviction notice. The look on his face when he saw it was priceless, a mix of shock and disbelief. He immediately tried the usual tricks, sweet-talking me, promising to pay, blaming hard times, and even pretending to be cooperative. But I remained calm, professional, and utterly unshaken. I knew this was karma doing its slow work. Years of disrespect and bullying couldn't be undone overnight, but now Derek was the one losing control. I stuck to the facts, the paperwork, and the law, giving him no room to wiggle out of the situation. Every time Derek tried to guilt-trip me or make excuses, I listened politely but didn't budge. I made it clear that his behavior as a tenant was unacceptable and that the eviction was a consequence of his own actions. No drama, no insults, just business. Meanwhile, the other tenants started feeling relief. They knew someone was finally holding Derek accountable. I could sense the shift in the building's atmosphere. It was as if a dark cloud was slowly lifting. Derek's panic was obvious. He started showing up at my office, begging for more time, promising to change, but it was too late. The legal process had started, and all I could do was sit back and let the system run its course. The day of the court hearing arrived, and Derek was visibly nervous. What he didn't expect was for me to be there as the property manager, calmly presenting the case. When the judge asked who was representing the landlord, I stood up. That's when I decided to reveal my identity. Looking Derek straight in the eyes, I said, "You don't remember me, but you made my life hell in high school." The courtroom went quiet. His face went pale as realization hit him. Derek stammered, trying to apologize and excuse his past behavior, but the damage was done. The judge didn't care about old-school drama. This was about unpaid rent and rule-breaking. Derek's excuses fell flat. The judge ruled in my favor, granting the eviction. Derek had no choice but to accept it, looking defeated and small. It was a powerful moment for me. Not just winning the case, but finally confronting the person who caused me so much pain all those years ago. Eviction day came quietly. The constable and a small crew showed up early in the morning. Derek watched helplessly as his belongings were loaded onto the curb. Boxes, furniture, and trash piled up in front of the building. I stayed back, watching from a distance. There was no joy or gloating in my heart, only a calm satisfaction. This was the moment where the past and present collided, a full circle, I never imagined possible. Neighbors peeked from their windows, some nodding silently in approval. Derek packed up his things, muttering under his breath, but no longer bold or arrogant. He was just a man facing the consequences of his own choices. As the crew finished, Derek slumped into his car and drove away. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. The nightmare of my teenage years was finally over. Reflecting on everything, I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. I didn't feel the need to gloat or rub his failure in his face. I simply felt peace. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming the person they have to answer to, the one who rises above, who stays professional, and who doesn't let past pain define their future. I had turned the tables without stooping to his level. I'd reclaimed my power quietly and effectively, proving that patience and persistence were stronger than anger and resentment. This experience taught me that justice doesn't always have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's the quiet victories that matter most. Thanks for reading my story here on r/Pettyrevenge. Sharing this journey has been cathartic, and I hope it inspires anyone dealing with their own past bullies or toxic people. Remember, sometimes life hands you justice on a silver platter. You just have to recognize it and let it unfold. And that's how I evicted my bully. That wraps up today's episode of r/Payback. If you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to subscribe for more epic stories.